This is Stephen Foster on the occasion of the exhibition Dark Places, and I'm joined today by four of the artists: Neal White, Steve Rowell, Steve Beard and Victoria Halford. Neal, first of all, this exhibition emerged from a collaboration of a number of curatorial partners, but in many ways you were central to this, so I wonder if you'd give us some idea of how the exhibition came together.
It originated not solely from me, but through conversations with Arts Catalyst and Helen Sloan, who worked together on a series of commissions around concepts of dark places. And Office of Experiments, which I initiated, was very interested in doing something which was perhaps looking at the whole concept of dark places, a kind of broader UK view. And it seemed that there were so many artists involved in so many different places in different ways that it seemed there was a lot of rich content to kind of look at.
You were in this exhibition both on your own as an artist and as a partnership as well.
The room that we're sitting in now is the Office of Experiments project, which is the overt research project. And Office of Experiments works as a collaborative body. So this project was developed with Steve Rowell, myself, somebody called Lisa Haskell, and a few other researchers with the support of Arts Catalyst. And Steve and I have been working on field research for some time, and what you're seeing here in this room is the South edition of the overt research, looking into dark places, sites of interest, sites of spaces of secrecy.
Steve and Victoria, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your project and especially the H&S lab in the Peak District, which your piece is based upon.
We're primarily interested in accidents and the nature of the accident, particularly the industrial accident. So in that sense, that for us is the real dark place. The Health and Safety Laboratory, which is located on a remote conical hill in a relatively inaccessible part of the Peak District, is where many of these kinds of large-scale accidents, often sadly involving many deaths, are investigated.
We went on a little tour throughout the grounds and throughout most of the buildings, and there's a huge amount of space there. There's lots of different departments and lots of areas that were, you know, they laid open to us, and they do all manner of things. They make models, they make life-size models and to-scale models. They have a massive archive there, film archive, photo archive as well. So during conversations, they frequently sort of referred to ongoing legal matters and legal cases that they sort of had interesting anecdotes about, but would then sort of say, oh, you can't talk about that.
We're having a kind of whistle-stop tour around the exhibition here, so Steve, I wonder if you could just talk through the other piece that you have in the exhibition here.
Sure. It's a portion of a much larger project called the Ultimate High Ground. In this case, it's the Ultimate High Ground UK, and it refers to a project I began about 2 years ago, sort of looking at America's sort of footprint abroad. But of course, this subject is quite large, and one person can only do so much, so I decided to focus on one aspect of it, looking at sites of communication, and kind of sort of like looking at the metaphor behind that. There's two primary ones here in the UK. One of them is Menwith Hill in North Yorkshire near Harrogate. That's the largest of its type outside of the US. It's a spy base, basically, and how people look at it. And then RAF Fylingdales, which is a radar facility, is in a way sort of its protector. It's basically looking at the satellites and objects, you know, as large as your fist, basically, or as small as your fist, and looking at these objects, tracking them, and sort of cataloging them, thinking about how these objects may or may not eventually interact with satellites, causing them to smash into one another and bring the whole system crashing down. And the project is basically a sort of a photographic project, but there's a video element to it in this room that I've sort of constructed. That's looking at the four corners of Menwith Hill, but looking away from the base.
It's a good time to mention the other artist in the exhibition is an installation by Beatriz da Costa, Memorial to the Still Living, which gives examples which have been taken from the Natural History Museum and the Horniman Museum of indigenous plants and animals that are threatened with extinction.
Well, Beatriz was very interested in working with the Natural History Museum, you know, an institution in itself that has spent a long time and represents a certain body of knowledge, and I think she's in a way revealing some of the aspects that are hidden maybe from everyday view.
This exhibition was built upon the idea of exploring the relationship between science, research and technology. But in fact, it could look as if it's about conspiracy and paranoia. But you've been quite careful to not emphasise that side of things. And it occurred to me, I wondered whether it's possible that one of the problems we confront today is that the world of science and research is so advanced that the average layperson really can't understand it. So it's quite possible that many things are less overt than one might imagine, simply because they are less communicable to a layperson.
If you talk to people about the actual work they do, the investigation into Hillsborough, everybody knows what that was about. And okay, there's a guy that measures how much pressure can go on a steel bar before it buckles, but everybody knows what it means in real life. So the pure science may not be something that people can really understand, but one of the appeals for us to go to HSL is that it's stuff that absolutely everybody gets.
There is a sense in which there is an imaginary happening within this work that's going on, whilst everybody is plotting out and looking at and scrutinising these sites. It casts a shadow. You know, the darkness is the shadow is what you don't know, and that's the space in which the imagination becomes very fertile. And you know, we become quite paranoid. You know, and you do.
Or imaginative.
Yeah, and imaginative. Right. It's one of the two things. And I mean, I think when you look at contemporary society, and there's a strong fascination in conspiracy theory. But you look at contemporary politics and you think of, you know, something very controversial, Al-Qaeda, for example, their network. You know, how it's not a single site of power which one can see. It's a hidden, concealed kind of political resistance or whatever, ideological resistance that's dispersed. And so, you know, as a layperson looking at that, you're kind of left with these very thin representations of networks and threads and media spectacle. And you're filling in so much of what is actually there. When it comes to science, it's not exactly the same thing, but you have similar things happening. Yes, well, the layperson knows it up to a point and they understand applied areas, but there's so much of it they don't know about that they will just project into. And I think, you know, I've been working in and around science for some time, and I think this is something that science has yet to get to grips with, that science is possibly also what people perceive of it as well as what it is.
There is, on the one hand, the challenge of how do we make complex social systems, whether they're collections of scientists distributed around the world or collections of terror cells, how do we actually make them signify, how do we actually build representations that are meaningful? It may well be that an artist or a cultural practitioner actually has to stimulate a certain amount of paranoia imaginatively in order that they can construct what we wanted to do, which was a narrative about these places. And a narrative is something that the public is used to sort of grappling with as a means of understanding complex subjects. So it may be that there's a sort of larger irony at work to an extent, because if this paranoia is simply an imaginative tool, perhaps it has actually less sort of social and political purchase on its material than it might think in its wilder moment. So there's a sense in which actually, as an artist, you may think that you're an outsider. You may think that, in our case, once the implied social contract had been revealed at HSL, that they are making decisions on your behalf without you being informed or without your consent being offered about how many people it's acceptable to die in a train crash from our perspective, or you know, you can think about how that can signify in other areas. Sure. But actually it's a question of, well, how much responsibility do you actually want to take for this yourself? And to say that you're part of these equations that are being put together, and actually can the representations that artists are putting together for the benefit of the public actually help those discussions to take place in a way that's a bit more meaningful.
Well, this exhibition has revealed two things as far as I'm concerned. An interesting way of working which you share, and your research-based activity has revealed lots of other things which are absolutely fascinating. I'd like to thank you all for your contributions today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.